Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy and Cat Stevens jingling in the background.
Yeah, she'll be on her merry way shortly. How are you today, David?
I'm good. How are you, Bruce?
I'm pretty good, all things considered, for a gloomy Monday in November with snow on the ground and no hockey being played anywhere near me. As good as it's going to get.
I always hate a cold November, Bruce. It just makes winter seem forever here. Like if you get really cold November, it seems like it lasts for years, winter sometimes. And we haven't had cold Novembers so much lately, but we're getting one now. So Bruce, we're watching those Oilers players in Europe, and it's fascinating. I'm finding it really interesting. So we're going to talk today about the following players. Recent games from Puljujarvi, where he got ejected from the game. Philip Berryland, who is known as Bergland to Oilers fans. While they're in Europe, we've decided while the players are in Europe, we're going to use their European pronunciations. It's kind of weird to go to a game like where they're talking about Berryland or Broberg and then start to talk about Bergland and Broberg. It just seems wrong to me. So as long as we're listening, we'll see how it goes in the future. We'll see if this catches on using their proper pronunciation for their names, which is kind of a nice thing to do with people in general, like, pronounce their names like they pronounce them. If you're Philippe, it should be Philippe and not Philip, and, that kind of thing. Okay, so Berryland, you watched him.
I did.
Dylan Holloway, you saw his first game.
I did.
Theodore Landstrom, Ryan McLeod, Kirill Maximov, Raphael Lavoie, Joachim Nygaard, and Philippe Broberg. Those are the players we'll talk about. But Bruce, we're going to start with just a little quick discussion about two things. First, we'll go with the Oilers retro jerseys, which have come out, and Emily Kaplan of ESPN has her off-season power rankings for NHL teams, and we'll talk about that. What do you think of the new sweaters, the new retro sweaters?
Not a whole lot. I mean, I guess.
Oh, I can't hear you, Bruce. You hit the mute button again or something. Something come unplugged? Yeah, something come unplugged there?
No, that may have also been the cat.
Oh.
She's being a nuisance today. I may have to give her the eviction notice here shortly. Anyway, she just jumped up and she must have hit a button somehow. I didn't do anything. My hands are on my legs. Anyway.
I believe you. Bruce McCurdy, I believe you.
Yeah, they're not very retro. I mean, retro of what? Like the Oilers never wore a jersey that was really like that. They never had orange on their shoulders. I mean, if you wanted to go retro in the late WHA period, time when Gretzky arrived, when I first had season tickets, they had blue shoulders, and then the crest was filled in with orange. And just the oil drop was white, and it had blue Oilers on an orange background in the crest. Now, that would be retro, because that's actually what they used to look like.
Just give me a second. I'm going to go find my hockey cards and see how... I thought I'd seen a sweater like this before. Give me 1 sec.
Good luck finding that one. Anyway, it's this whole retro craze. I mean, some of the teams really have gone full retro and brought back things of the past. And other teams have brought in, I guess the WHA is getting some recognition. The WHA is, David, with Colorado Avalanche wearing a variation of the old Quebec Nordiques jersey, crest or logo and everything. Not quite the right colors, but it actually looks good in the color they chose. And the Carolina Hurricanes have brought back the Hartford Whalers logo, one of the classic logos of the past. Now, that is not truly a WHA logo, because in the WHA they were the New England Whalers, and they only became the Hartford Whalers upon entering the NHL. Well, at least those two gave a nod to the WHA. And then the course, the Winnipeg Jets that went to Arizona, if they brought back the Winnipeg Jets uh, appearance, then all kinds of confusion would result. So I'll give them a pass. I would like to see the Oilers bring back that style, but whatever. It doesn't look bad. So
Okay.
we'll.
Let's go through a little history lesson here, Bruce,
Sure.
on the Oilers sweaters.
Okay.
Because it looks like they changed them about 3 times, as far as I can tell, in the first 10 years. Okay.
In the NHL or in the history of the franchise?
History of the franchise.
Right. Okay.
So here,
the Jacques Plante orange.
Let me see if I focus on that or not. Can you see that?
Not well. Bring it back closer to your face. We'll probably have a better chance. Yeah, I can just read Edmonton Oilers.
Well, you can see the colors of the sweaters.
See the color, yeah, Alberta Oilers. And then the actual thing isn't focused. There we go. Okay.
Okay, so that's it's got the blue shoulders and the red and the orange body. Yep. And that's the sweater they wore for much of the WHA years.
On the road, yeah.
And then this is a road, yeah. These are all mostly, and this is 1975-76. They have the orange shoulders.
Right.
And the white and the blue sweater.
Yep.
And then, I guess they keep that in the first year, or is this is a famous hockey card.
Yeah, that's Gretzky's rookie card. Yeah, they kept the orange logo, the orange Oilers on the white background with the blue oil drop on the blue away uniform.
But then they switched to this, which is the blue Oilers.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Anyway, that's probably
the Gretzky rookie card
from the that's from the WHA.
That picture would have been from the WHA and then printed the first year of the NHL because they went to they went only then did they go to the same logo on both home and away. And before then they had 2 different looks of the logo, neither of which was the permanent look. So
yeah. So you're not a fan of this?
I don't hate it. I just don't particularly consider it retro. It's a it's a faux retro. It's going back to a time that never existed in terms of the Oilers. Like I said, some of the other teams have gone more traditional, and some have gone sort of. I think there's they call it reverse retro too, which I guess that's how you can make sense of what the Montreal Canadiens did with their classic uniform.
Did anyone go, they didn't say, now, to be fair to them, they're not saying these are replica jerseys. They're saying these are kind of retro look.
I guess.
Retro styling sweaters. So they never promised to go right back. I would have liked to see them go right back and do a replica jersey. I've always wanted them to go back and just do the 1980, early 80s sweaters and wear those. Honestly. Wear those sweaters. What's wrong with those sweaters, Bruce? They were good enough to win 5 Stanley Cups in.
Yeah, they won cups, those sweaters.
Why don't they just go back one time and just do that sweater? Bruce McCurdy, why don't they do that? What is wrong with them?
I don't know. I mean, if the Calgary Flames can go back to the snotting horse, I mean, the snorting horse, I guess, we can, why not go back to when times were actually good around here? But now I'm sounding like a grumpy old man. I remember when, Sonny, when we were actually good at hockey.
I like those early 80s sweaters. That's the classic Oilers sweater. I don't know, in all of the, we've seen so many sweaters over the years. I don't know why they can't, with one of them, just go back. Don't you think Connor McDavid would like to wear the same freaking sweater? Just like the Montreal Canadiens, they wear the same sweater.
They have forever.
Guy Lafleur and Jean. What is wrong with that? Why is this such an idea that's never occurred to anyone in the Oilers organization? Yeah, but Bruce, they'd sell a ton of you don't think if they brought out a real early 1980 to 87 or what, I don't know when they changed it, their sweater. They didn't change them that much in those days. It was pretty much the same for a long time. Just looking at my hockey cards here, right till the 90s, it was the same sweater. Why don't they just go back to that sweater? Is that
I, this is supposedly a fourth jersey or sweater, depending which side of the border you live on. And it's, I mean, all these years they talked about the third. Now this is a fourth. And because it's white, does that mean the Oilers only wear it in the road, or does that mean the other teams bring their dark jerseys in and play against the home whites? I don't mind that. I actually used to like the home whites because you'd see all the different colors of all the teams, right? It wasn't every game orange versus white like it is now. It was white versus blue, white versus black, white versus green, white versus orange, white versus red. You know. Anyway, that's just me.
Actually like the retro jersey. I should say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I
It
made
looks
that
all
clear.
right.
I like it. I think it does remind me a lot of the WHA jerseys, sweaters. Sweaters, as people, Canadians of a certain age call them, and jerseys as Americans and Canadians under the age of 50 call them. It reminds me of those old WHA sweaters, and it works for me. I don't mind the new one. It's one of the I liked, you know what, the one jersey sweater I liked a lot, jersey sweater, was the McFarlane jersey,
Mm-hmm.
by the cartoon artist. I don't know. I don't know if I ever saw his cartoon work very much. What was his name? Um,
Todd
was it
McFarlane.
McFarlane?
Mm-hmm.
Todd Mcfarlane. Well, he was one of the owners, I believe, at one point, one of the 35 or 36 owners in the EIG. I
Yeah.
liked that sweater quite a bit in terms of being a different kind of sweater for the Oilers with the whole different design, whole different concept. That was kind of cool.
I never liked it because it looked too much like the LA Kings home jersey that the Kings unveiled the day they acquired Wayne Gretzky from the Oilers. They came out, they got rid of the ugly purple and yellow, which they've now brought back. And they came out with these black and white and silvers. And Gretzky, the day he got traded there, August 9th, 1988, came out at the LA press conference wearing that sweater. And I never really liked that sweater for that reason. And I just thought the McFarlane Oiler jersey was way too close to that in its design. It wasn't quite black, but in terms of the width of the stripe on the bottom and everything, it just looked too similar. And I thought, I'm having trouble rooting for the Kings here. You know, it's supposed to be the Oilers. But again,
Yeah.
that's just me.
I'm just like, I just think the Habs have it right. You don't change your sweater. You
Oh, the
keep the same sweater.
Blackhawks. The Blackhawks got it
The
right.
Blackhawks have it right. The New York Yankees, do they change their sweater? The Boston, I don't watch baseball anymore. Boston Red Sox. I mean, you don't. And the
Still
Maple
wear the
Leafs, they do. The
pinstripes, the
Maple Leafs have
Yankees.
changed their sweater, and look at them, Bruce. Look at them. Look at this history of that sorry franchise. What happens when you start messing around with the sweater where your team won five Stanley Cups in the '60s, whatever it was, four
They won
Stanley
11
Cups,
Stanley Cups in their first 50 years and zero in the 53
and
since then.
what do we know? What's the correlation? They
They
switched
changed their
around their sweater.
sweaters. What a
That's
rookie
got what
move.
it's got to be. That's what it's got to be. I just finished Brian Burke's audiobook, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Burke's Rules, and
Mm-hmm.
the good news is he reads it, so it's in
Mm-hmm.
his, and it had to be him.
Yeah.
But it is fantastic fun listening
Mm-hmm.
to that book. If
I
you're
bet.
looking for something on your walks,
Mm-hmm.
go on Audible and buy the audiobook. It is well worth whatever it is that you have to pay for. I get a monthly subscription to Audible, so I get
Well,
a book a month.
mm-hmm.
But his stories are great, and he talks about running the Leafs and about how he's failed, uh, and about all the different reasons it's hard to achieve in that market. But he thinks someone's going to one day do it. I wonder if that will be Kyle Dubas, who just drafted more soft skill in Rodion Amarov, according to Bruce, not to Brian Burke. Okay, Bruce. Emily Kaplan's piece. She has the Oilers ranked 17th. Bruce, this is a team, the Edmonton Oilers finished last year in winning percentage in the NHL 12th. I don't know how anyone could look at this Oilers roster, like honestly, look at this Oilers roster and say it's worse than last year's Oilers roster. What you could say is the Oilers maybe got lucky last year in terms of their special teams.
Mm-hmm.
And their special teams play is unsustainable, especially on the penalty kill. And I think that's a completely fair comment. I think that's a rational comment to make. And it's unlikely that the Oilers' penalty kill will be that good, and maybe their power play won't be quite as good. But I think their power play is going to be bloody outstanding, so I'm not that worried about it. But Bruce, I just think the Oilers are a lot better team especially since the Cahoon signing. I mean, when you add it all up, this is a much better team than the start of last year and even the finish of last year. Even without Oscar Klefbom, I see this as a better team, at least. Maybe not a much better team, a better team. What do you think?
Should be better 5-on-5.
Yeah.
And I think they will have to make up some deficit from the penalty kills, which were, generational last year in terms of the production of the power play, best in over 40 years, and the combined percentage of the power play and penalty kill put together, which is somewhat of a bogus stat, but when you lump them together, that also was the best in something like 40 years. And I mean, you obviously can't expect that every year, or you wouldn't be setting 40-year milestones, right? But
yeah,
I still think I think the power play will be good, for sure. Penalty kill is almost certain to fall off its high horse to some extent, and they're going to make up some of it at even strength. I see them as a playoff team, and but she, like you say, she's got all the Canadian teams lumped in there together. Toronto 11th, Vancouver 14th, Montreal 15th, Calgary 16th, Edmonton 17th, Winnipeg 18th. And if there really is a Canadian division, it's going to be a brawl. There's no other way for it to go but to be, because there's no like truly outstanding team that's going to pull away from the rest that I can see. And at the same time, there's 6 teams that are close, and then Ottawa, which is definitely improving, and I don't see them making the playoffs, but I see them winning a bunch of games and pissing off the fans of the teams they beat from time to time, and it'll be the Oilers on occasion. You just know it.
I don't see that. I just don't see the Habs, Bruce. I know everyone's excited about the Habs. They spent a lot of money, like the Oilers used to spend a lot of money on kind of older players who are not drivers of their team. Maybe good players, but maybe not half the time. So, and they have a lot of hopes tied up in 2 young centers, Kotkaniemi and Suzuki. Now, both of them may become first. That might be your Montreal first and second center for the next 10 years, or not. And so if there was one team that I'm skeptical of in that group, I mean, the Flames have a good team. We know that. They've had some losses, though, too, on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver, a little less deep overall. And, I like the Oilers' depth. They got a lot of really good players, plus 2 superstars. And I just don't see the Oilers being worse than last year. So,
yeah, my favorite argument for people that don't like the Oilers is, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay, my whole screen's just went blank for some reason. My favorite teams for now we're back. The people that don't like the Oilers is, well, you take away those 2 superstars, and there's not much there. And I'm going, well, yeah, but aren't those 2 superstars like on the team and actually playing, scoring goals and stuff? I mean, you can't.
And in their prime?
Yeah, that too. So anyway, I find that argument, well, there's not much there besides those guys. I mean, take the 2 top players away from any team, they're going to be not so good. But you take the 2 best players from Edmonton, I mean, obviously there's a wider disparity here than anywhere with 2, high-end players.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not feeling it for the Habs. Maybe, and the Leafs, well, they are the Leafs. They keep changing their sweater around and jinxing themselves that way. So that hasn't worked out for them. Let's go, Bruce, to our recent drop in on games. So I just have a few overall comments on the more games I see of players, I'd say the more balanced my view of that player is. Because you start to see good games and bad games. Like you can watch Draisaitl and McDavid through the year, and you'll see some games where Leon Draisaitl is a 2 or a 3, according to our, and that's 3 is a poor game and a 2 is an atrocious game, essentially. Mm-hmm. So you'll see games, so when you drop in on players, and same with Connor McDavid. So it's only when you start to see players, play 10, 15 games that you start to get a much better idea of their true talent and what they bring to the game. And we're about 2 or 3 or 4 games in with most of these players. So anything we say needs to be taken with that in mind. And the other thing that needs to be kept in mind for both us and people listening to us in terms of our evaluation, I think, is that we're watching games on the European ice.
Right.
And you start to get the sense when there's some players, I think, like we're getting, generally speaking, a pretty good take on Theodore Landstrom in his European games, for instance. Now, how well that's going to translate to the smaller North American ice, where the style, like the play in the corners is much more important. Defensive battling is much more important. And then there's a player like Philip Berryland, who maybe hasn't looked as good on the big ice in Europe, but maybe his game is going to translate a little differently in North America. So that's the other kind of proviso or that I would put on caveat. I would put on all of our ratings is that we're like Ryan McLeod has looked good in some games in Europe, but how does that work on the smaller ice in North America? So that's what I would add. Any thoughts in that regard, Bruce?
Yeah, a couple. One, I've now rated 2 games of Jesse Puljujarvi, and one he was just outstanding, just flying around the ice, winning races to pucks, winning puck battles, setting up plays. And the other game, he just looked out of sorts. He was more reacting to the puck rather than anticipating it. He was sort of getting into position to check, but not really getting his shoulders in there and doing the work, reaching in a little bit from outside. And he wasn't having much of an impact in the game. And eventually he got frustrated and took a couple of bad penalties in the third period. And it was like 2 different players. I mean, I'm looking at these 2 games. I know it's the same guy and with some of the same attributes, but one day he was feeling it and one day he wasn't. And that happens, as you say, to the best of them. And as for the European ice, yeah, absolutely. That for a guy like Ryan McLeod, who depends on his speed, all that extra room gives him more, gives him a little more room to roam, and also all that extra perimeter space, which ultimately is what it is extra speed. Extra space very wide and far away from the net is not necessarily going to resolve the primary knock against Ryan McLeod's game, that he doesn't go to and play well in the dirty areas of the ice, the tough areas in the trenches. Because in Europe, I mean, there are trenches, but they're just there's lots more green fields in between the trenches where you can play a lot of the game and not really get involved all that physically. So it is very much a different game over there. Very rare. I'm sure, David, I heard more crunches of players hitting the boards in the one game I watched from North America, which was Dylan Holloway's debut game in his sophomore season, than I think in all of the, or certainly in any one of the European games. Creaming guys into the board. You have to go out in position to hit a guy into the boards in the Europe, because the boards are so wide, far away from the net. So they just generally what little hitting there is in the open ice. But it's much more of a chess match, and the physicality, to my eye, is down a fair bit in the European game.
It's about, if it's half or a third of the physicality, it just is. I honestly find the game's a little boring. The European style of hockey. I think the North American style brand of hockey is far superior from a spectator point of view. Maybe it's just what I'm used to and what I like, but yeah, it just seems kind of like, I don't know, like they're going through the motions on a certain level. Maybe it's because there's no fans in the stands. Maybe there's even less intensity than normally in the European games as well, but haven't really been in love with the style of hockey. And this brings me back to Bert's book. He talked about his philosophy as a GM. He's famous for wanting the black and blue hockey, right? And he always had a goon on his team. So, and he himself admits that his idea of building a hockey team is a bit outmoded. Like truculence. He wears that. But what he talked about was really interesting, because he's in that era. Like, he needs to sell tickets. Like, his idea, he wants to put on a show for the fans, to sell tickets, to sell the game. It's not just necessarily about playing the trap and winning hockey games with Brian Burke. He won't do that. He would not do that, and he wouldn't hire a coach who would do that. His idea was he wants his team to trade chances, but to get more scoring chances. And he wants his team to be physical and to hit hard and to skate fast, hit hard. That's Brian Burke hockey. And that's a pretty good summation of the North American game. And I agree with them. I think that's the exciting hockey. That was Oilers, certainly, a high degree of skill in the Oilers hockey in the 1980s and also 2005-06 when the Oilers were also a very good team. But those teams also really hit. They were fierce, hard-hitting hockey teams, and I'm all in favor of that. So I think we've covered off. We've talked a lot about Puljujarvi. You summed them up. Let's just move on to Berryland, Bruce.
Sure.
What did you think of Philip Berglund / Berryland?
Yeah, they called him Berryland. And he, I saw sort of to me, he played an average game. I graded him a 5. I saw Lennstrom in the same game. I graded him a 5. Some very different from one another in terms of their style of play, but neither one had a huge impact on the game. They did their job, and it wasn't they weren't at the key points of the game necessarily. He looks like certainly compared to Broberg and to Lennstrom, he does not look like an elite skater like those two guys are. He looks like an average skater, and there's a fair gap.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's not like super, like he reminds me, his skating reminds me of Adam Larson, and he's the exact same size, 6'3", 209 pounds. He doesn't have the edge of Adam Larson, but he plays some of that game that Larson plays, just basics. Look after his side of the ice. Go and battle for every puck. Don't get sucked too far out of position. Solid. I would call him a solid defender. Still 23 years old. Still presumably on the upside of his learning curve. But I'm not sure how high the ceiling is going to be for this particular player.
Yeah, he kind of reminds me of these, big, strong defensemen who can fire off a hard shot, make a hard pass, not necessarily accurate in either case. Kind of the to go way back the Barry Long school of defense, or more recently Curtis Foster. That kind of game where they look a bit stiff when they're skating, right? Like there's not a lot of agility there or necessarily speed. I was hoping, so far been hoping to see a bit more from Berryland. I have definitely not seen his A game. I'm sure of that. So I'll leave it at that.
He's on a pretty iffy team too, Lynn
Yeah,
Chilton?
really
And
weak.
he's one of a couple guys over there that are playing, whose coach is a former Oiler. That guy being Bert Robertson, the immortal Bert Robertson, 2 S's. That was a Swede that played with the Oilers, 20 odd years ago, not for long, but
I don't even remember him.
he was a winger / defenseman, and I think mostly played defense when he was an Oiler. A Swede that was just on the cusp of the NHL but never really made it. Anyway, he's now back coaching in Sweden, and he moved on from Skellefteå to Linköping, and Berglund moved with him. That's why he changed teams. He wanted that coach apparently. So
I see. So that's why he moved. Yeah, it's not. We're going to bring this up again when we talk about Raphael Lavoie. Bruce, you saw Dylan Holloway. I'd seen him I watched one of his games from last year, and my quick take is it seems like he's the Philip Broberg of forwards in a lot of ways. The Oilers seem to, there's a commonality with some of these top picks, including McLeod, and they have gone for with a number of high picks, big, really fast, agile players. Big, really fast, agile players. If you were to say, if you were to rate their skills, those would be the things that stand out a lot. And then skill. They're all skilled. But the question is, how much elite skill do they have with all of them? And, in terms of their, I think, and maybe there's like different questions about how competitive each one is. They're not like with, kind of maybe Holloway at most, obviously competitive individual, then Broberg pretty darn competitive, and maybe some questions about McLeod. But they're all big, fast. They're all big and fast, and they've got some skill. And so that's how I'm seeing Holloway. What about you?
Yeah, he's big by the modern standards, which surprisingly, after years and years of these guys just getting ever bigger and huger in their draft years, uh, they're gone more towards fast, quick, and uber skilled in recent years. And he's a little bit of a throwback. He's not gigantic. He's 6'1", 203 currently. And I'm sure he's going to fill out to, a solid 210 or 215 by the time he's 23 years old.
Yeah.
But he's already, he's just turned 19 and he's already, let's put it this way. If he's a boy playing in a men's league, it sure didn't show in the game I saw the other day. He was a man among those men. And he was physically uh, winning more than his share of battles. You talk about elite skill, and with the puck, he's nothing sort of really shone out as being, extremely creative or anything. But his elite skills are, some of them are in his skating legs. He's super fast, and to my eye, he's got uh, he's a good connective skater. He can turn backwards to receive a pass, pivot, and be going forward again, and it's not awkward at all. Like he does it so naturally, he just flows to to lateral skating, to forward, to spinning,
Yeah.
to face the play. All that stuff looks like it's second nature to the guy, and that's for a 19-year-old just drafted um, skater of any position. That's a real nice thing to have. Another thing he does is that he not only does he skate to the puck, but he skates through the puck. If the other guy on the other team happens to have it, he'll go in there and he'll finish that check. He won't just go in and stop where the puck is and try and battle for it. He'll go in and take the body, and then pick up his reward when he's done. There was one play in that game, late in the third period. They were protecting a 2-0 lead, Wisconsin. And the other team was trying to put the pressure on the guy who was down in the corner with the puck. I think, they didn't have the goalie out yet, but they had, it was getting to that time. And Holloway, sort of the second badger into the corner, the first guy didn't really go in deep, and Holloway just came in and just went right through the guy, crunched him. The puck came out, went to the defenseman. He made one pass out, and it was a 2-on-1 the other way for Wisconsin, cycle over, just one hit done, completely disrupted it. And that was one of maybe 4 good checks that he had. Two in the open ice in particular that were just dandy hits, where he just hit the guy, right in the breastbone and put him down. And so, the Oilers, like, you can sure see where his skill set will complement what the Oilers have currently. I mean, always you got room for another speedy player on your team. But if a guy that makes a beeline for the puck all the time, and then wins puck battles when he gets there, and then can make a pass, out of the corner or what have you. Anything else he can do on top of that is bonus. I mean, if he can do those things, there's room for that on the team. Whether it's top 6, bottom 6, this guy. I mean, I'd be shocked if this is not an NHL player. And
I was just thinking the same
first round
thing.
draft, you should get an NHL player. Well, I'd say the odds are more like 90% than 70%, kind of thing for this guy. He could play center as he did throughout this game, and he was 10-4 in the faceoff circle, and he was, looked strong in the position. Certainly had the legs to play the full 200-foot game that center has to play more than any other position. So that's, one possible future for him. But another one is to move him into the wing in the top 6. And the Oilers have needs in both of those areas. They need a good solid 3C. They still need top 6 wingers. He could be either of those things. So lots to like in this player, and scored a goal in each game. And in my game, it was just a power play wrist shot from between the circles. And the other game, he won it with a real nice goal that broke a tie in the third period. Yeah,
Looked like a little bit bad goaltending, but it was a very nice shot. Like, it was a very nice shot. He kind of went fast around the net and put it in from a bad angle, but he still roofed it, as you say. Yeah, Bruce, his coach right now, Tony Granado, is pretty upset because they're sending him off right now. The World Junior team in Canada needs its players now because a lot of them aren't playing at all. And it's a big camp. I think more than 50 players, is I think, if I'm not mistaken about that. And they're going to have them for a long time so they can start to, because these guys aren't playing. And like Broberg in Sweden is playing right now. All the Swedish players are going to be up against Canada. All the Russian players, all the European players are playing full schedules right now.
Right.
And the Canadian kids aren't, which is a huge disadvantage. Like it really is. So they want them to try to replicate that. I think Holloway will have a good chance of making the Canadian team, given his skill set, his speed and his hitting. Like as a fourth line guy, hard to imagine that they wouldn't want him on their team. That said, maybe they should have waited a couple of weeks to call him in. Let him play. What is it? He's got 12 games in 19 days or something
12
like that.
12 games in 27.
27.
That was their return to play, was last weekend. So they're trying to catch up on their first half in sort of November, December. So they were, in the rush before, midterm exams kind of thing. They'd stuffed in 12 games, and he only played 2 of those games. So he's going to miss 10 games to go to this camp. So, he better make the team because, he's given up and he himself's a little sort of bummed by having to, leave his team and leave real games for, scrimmages and stuff.
Yeah.
But the way Team Canada is designed, it's like rare that they have any college players at all.
Yeah.
And, most years they have maybe 1, sometimes 2. So, I mean, it's obviously the major junior players that are driving the bus for the Team Canada game plan. And rather than have a camp that runs from December 10th to 23rd or whatever that they normally do, this year they pushed it way ahead and thought, let's get, 3 weeks of scrimmages and practices in, and then get it into our main camp. And so it's a different. So they're all coming to Red Deer.
Yeah.
I would have thought leave the guy in Wisconsin for a couple of weeks, like you say, and then bring him in. But then, of course, there's all this potential quarantine issue, and sort of crossing the border is not a simple matter that it was. In fact, I don't know what he's facing. He left the team. He played Friday, Saturday. He left the team on Sunday. Presumably, he's in Alberta now. But when he'll actually be allowed to go out on the ice
and play, fly into Calgary, there's that new program, Bruce, in Calgary where you get tested. Then you're in quarantine for 24 to 48 hours. You get your test back, and then you're free to go and you get another test. So that's not that big an issue. Listen, if Holloway had decided to stay, usually I get pretty cheesed off, honestly, when good players decide not to play for Team Canada. It's bothered me since 1972 when they didn't allow Bobby Hull to play, and J.C. Tremblay and Jerry Cheevers. So, and then we've had other players rarely decide to sit out, and it's never sat well with me. But if in this case, if Holloway had said, I'm staying and I'm going to play for my university team, I would have actually been okay with it, because I just think in terms of his hockey development, I'm not actually convinced that playing for Team Canada is his best move in terms of, because they're just asking a lot, and he's going to miss a lot of really competitive games against at least, really good competition. So, I would have accepted. I'm glad he's gone, but I would have accepted if he didn't.
Surprising they couldn't wait till December 1st or something. I mean, the tournament doesn't start till Christmas Day. I mean, from where we sit today, it's 5+ weeks off. So,
bit of a power trip, if you ask me.
You mentioned, Hockey Canada has their ways, Anyway, I certainly well remember the hullabaloo of 1972 when Bobby Hull was basically banished from Team Canada because he went to the WHA. But what I better remember from 72, and these are grudges that I hold to this day, Vic Hadfield leaving the team halfway through the tournament because he didn't like how much ice time he wasn't getting, and he just bailed on the team.
Who else?
There was 3 of them. One of them was the youngster Gilbert Perreault.
Dale Talon.
And then the veteran, then the guy that got booed every time he ever played Maple Leaf Gardens after that, Vic Hadfield. From the gag line, goal to game line with the New York Rangers. He used to play with Jean Rattel and Rod Gilbert on a famous line that was supposed to be a star line for Team Canada. And Vic came to camp out of shape, and he wound up sitting in the press box a bit. And he sulked and he left. It galvanized the rest of the team a little bit. But that was a guy who chose not to play for Team Canada, and he quit on them in the middle of a tournament. And that was what didn't sit well, and still doesn't, frankly.
I'd forgotten that. One. Well, I remember that it happened, but it's not. I'm not bearing an active grudge like you are.
I am. Dick Hadfield can go.
Pretty an Irish name. Are the Irish? Brian Burke was saying the Irish are famous for holding grudges. Is that you, Bruce?
Possibly. I mean, Vic Hadfield can still go and pound sand as far as Bruce McCurdy is concerned.
And Joseph Kampala.
Oh.
That was apparently some dirty deal. I don't know what it was, but anyway.
It's a ref, yeah.
I have to look it up.
Franz Bader.
Franz Bader. What did they do? Let's not get into it because they might still be alive and can sue us, but there was something going on there.
Bader and worse is what Alan Eagleson called them, the two referees. Bader and worse.
Okay. Theodore Landstrom. You saw him play. I've been really impressed. It sounds like was he a little less impressive than the first game that you saw him in, or about the same, or what's your thinking?
I saw many of the same things. I mean, the first game, you and I both watched him just before the last podcast, and he knocked both our socks off with his skating and so on. And he still showed many of those things in this game. I don't think he was, again, feeling it to quite the degree he had been in the previous game.
Yeah.
And he was, he played an okay, solid game, but he wasn't really an impactful player. Whereas in the first game, he was like, he scored a goal. He was involved in a couple of big-time scoring chances, and he was kind of all over the ice. And in this game, still, the very good multi-directional skating. Like, you never know which direction the guy's going to take in his next stride. Like, he's really mobile in that sense. I do see. I see NHL caliber skills. The skating is a plus. I think the puck handling and the offensive threat part is a plus. Where he will be exposed, and the question will be how much will be exposed, is on the defensive side of the puck. And it's, how much will he give back versus how much he takes. And I see him as being, in Sweden, kind of an okay defensive player. He likes to lead with the stick, to poke check, to clear rebounds, as opposed to clearing the guys out of the crease kind of thing. It's the way he plays, and it's not, it's not all bad, but I can see him getting overpowered by, on the edge of his own goal crease kind of thing in against NHLers. And that's really hard to judge because he's not playing against that many NHLers. But in terms of the raw skills on display, he's got what it takes for sure.
That's the question about him, right? He's about the same size as Benning, somewhere between Benning and Chris Russell in terms of his size. So he's a smaller player, and his reach, I think he's listed at about 6 feet, 6'1", 170 or something like that. His reach is not great. And like you say, he's not a hitter. The thing in his favor is that he's often in position defensively. I haven't seen him out of position defensively. Like, he knows where to go. He's a very smart defensive player, but he's not a really forceful one. So he's going to have to Brian Benning or Chris Russell it up. He's going to have to step it up in terms of that, being a little bit more forceful defensively than perhaps he's used to, and he's gonna lose some battles. Benning and Russell they're positionally pretty much impeccable, and he can do that. He's a great skater. He's a smart player. So, but the question is, will he, what's that going to look like? I saw the same issue that you did though, and I have a question about it. So we'll see if that question gets answered. I do think, it's the advantage that Lagesson has over him, right? Is that Lagesson is this big physical defender, so he's not as good with the puck as Lennstrom, but we know he answers the other side of it a little bit better, and we know that for sure because we've seen him in North America. Bruce, you also saw Ryan McLeod play a game. Just played, what was it, just under 9 minutes in that game? Yeah. They don't love him, although he looks okay when I see him. But what did you think of him over there?
Yeah, he's getting NHL bottom 6 minutes, which is, eventually he projects to that, but you'd like to see him getting a little bit more play in the Swiss League. I mean, his skating is his standout skill, and he was skating. He was moving his feet, and he was involved in the game that way. Uh, a lot of it in, like you say, the wide ice. There's lots of places to go, and it's not necessarily the most effective places. But he was making things happen. He was confident with the puck. He was trying things that many of the other players weren't trying with the puck. Uh, he did score a goal on a nice shot from the slot, and he actually won the puck on the boards, stole it off of a guy on trying to clear the zone and cut right into the middle between the circles and let fly. So he certainly took it to the good area that time and scored. He was a culprit on one of the goals against, where there was kind of a defensive breakdown in front of the net, and it's hard to tell. Like they switched camera angles and then they switched back, and it was kind of hard to tell where the center and the defenseman got their wires crossed. But between them, they lost the guy that wound up alone in front scoring the goal. So it was probably a little bit on both of them.
Yeah.
He's got, I mean, superficially he looks impressive. Like he's a big guy. He can fly. He was playing center. He was in the middle of the action. He certainly didn't look out of place, and I couldn't honestly see any reason why he only played 9 minutes out of the 60. That seemed odd to me.
So my question, I think he can be an NHL winger. Like I'm starting to get a real sense of, here's someone who could play wing in the NHL on a third or fourth line and probably be okay. Like I could see him making a team soon. I'm not sure he's a center, and I need to see him get really smart and tough in the defensive slot as a defensive hockey player. I haven't seen that in Switzerland. I didn't necessarily see that last year in Bakersfield. And if that comes together, like I'm not, like they say he's got to play in the hard spots and the good ice play, the right in the two slots, right? I'm not so worried about him as an attacker. I think he's got some attacking skills and he'll figure that out. And everyone likes to score goals. He'll take it to the net. I'm more concerned with him in the defensive slot as a center. Right. I'm not seeing that skill or yet that acumen that it takes to be like I see in Gaetan Haas every game that I watch him. The smartness, the positional awareness. McLeod's really got to work on that, and I don't know what the system is on his team, because I often see him flying for a pass, kind of, and it's almost like they want him to take the face off, but he's not really a center in the defensive zone. So I'm a little bit confused by what I'm seeing with his play there. It could be that there's some system thing that is keeping him from being the guy in the low slot helping out the defenseman. So I'm not sure.
Well, and there was on the goal against, like I say, he got on the wrong side of the man, and that's part of this thought about him going into the tough areas. Well, sometimes in the defensive zone, the difference between the tough and the not so tough areas is whether you're on the inside or the outside of the guy you're covering. If you can get your body in between that guy and the net, you're going to have to battle for that position, but that's the position you want to be in more times than not. Yeah. And that's something that he's going to have to demonstrate on an ongoing basis, that he wants to establish that inside position. He's certainly got the skating chops and the size and the agility that he should be able to accomplish those things, but it's a matter of, getting the habits hammered down into his game that he does it consistently.
Yeah, it's almost like in the defensive zone, he should be thinking, who's the danger man in the slot? Who's the danger man in the inside position? Like get between him and the net, and just like that's your focus. And all right, Kirill Maximov, I saw him play for Red Army. I think they're still Red Army. There's Seska. Mm-hmm. They got the big red star on their sweater. It's a little bit wearing that. Honestly, Bruce, when I see the symbols of the communist regime in Russia, it makes me queasy, like, if I'm completely honest, but we won't get into that. Kirill Maximov is a really interesting hockey player because I saw him pretty good in this game, and his game isn't necessarily a European game. He plays a pretty heavy game on the boards, and he's strong on the boards. He's strong with the puck, and that's what I saw in this game. He's had a hard time getting ice time in the KHL. He didn't play today in the KHL after playing a pretty good game and getting an assist on a goal. So he's in and out of the lineup over there, but I liked his game. and it indicated to me like, okay, we were talking yesterday, last podcast, about the difference between him and Raphael Lavoie. Lavoie is eating up Allsvenskan, while Maximov's kind of in and out of the Seska lineup, and he's doing better than when he goes down to the VHL that he goes down to the minor leagues. He's done well there. So I'm not sure how much separation there is between those two players, honestly. I think they're in a similar place, with Lavoie being a year younger. Maximov, though, I can, Sean Patrick Ryan, who writes for the Cult of Hockey, writes at the Oil Night blog. He's often raved about this player, and I'm still seeing it. I'm still seeing, he didn't have a great year in Bakersfield, but he plays some heavy hockey, and there's potential there for that player.
Yeah, he's a real load, eh? Like, he's a big, heavy man already, and he's still pretty young. He must be 21 now.
Yeah,
and he's got some speed. I know SPR had on his Twitter feed a couple of highlights of him scoring points down there in the VHL, and he was flying. And I mean, you can't disguise flying. It's part of it, you compare the speed of the opponents, but part of it is just how fast is fast, and he's fast on these rushes, at least. Like, he's not a guy that's got the heavy boots that you often associate with a 220-pound winger, which is, I think, about what he projects to be. At least when he gets a head of steam up. Now, often it's those first few steps that are the difference maker with these players, and I'm looking forward to seeing him play a couple more games myself to judge that. But he's not slow of foot, and he does have skill. He can make a real nice pass, and he's a shooter. So, there's offense in there. And I know SPR said in his post about some of the depth Russians in the organization, he said he still sees him as being an NHLer. He has all along, and despite, his little bit travails last year and this year, and trying to establish a spot on a very deep CSKA lineup that's got a bunch of kids competing for not very many positions. He's starting to make his time count. Like you say, he had a really good game the last time, and he's back in the mix on the big club. So he's an intriguing player.
It's interesting because he's on the best team in the KHL, and Lavoie is on the worst team in Allsvenskan. So you think, Lavoie, he's killing it there, and Maximov, he's struggling this year. But that just shows about quality of competition both internally on your own team and the players you're playing against, because they're very similar players in a lot of ways. And it's good. I'm glad the Oilers have these two great big guys who have good shots and are tough. So I watched Lavoie's game, and he was -3 in the game. He wasn't really at fault on any of the goals against, and he's just on a terrible team. They can hardly make a pass. Well, they often don't make passes. They can make passes. They're pro hockey players. They often struggle, though, to make passes, even on the power play. But Lavoie himself is this monster guy. He's big. He's quite a huge hockey player. And very skilled in terms of passing and shooting the puck, and mean. He hits people. So I like the Oilers got a couple of power forward candidates. Well, we've just mentioned three of them: Holloway, Maximov, and Lavoie. Right. And they're all kind of, and theoretically McLeod, who isn't as physical as the other ones, but they're all, if you compare them like to, the last kind of power forward the Oilers developed was Pitlick, or Kara. I guess Kara would be another one. Pitlick. They haven't really developed a strong power forward, Bruce, in forever, right? So
pretty much
they've got some candidates here, and these players are all at least as good as Pitlick at that same age, I would say, and all at least as good as Bouchard at that same age. So, this is at least as good. And I think each one of those guys is a better player skill-wise than Bouchard was at that same age. Kara maybe a bit bigger and tougher, but yeah.
Well, McLeod and Holloway are centers, or at least they might project to be wingers in the long term, but they're centers. The three guys that I would lump together as power forwards are Maximov, Lavoie, and Maxim Borowskin, the
Yes.
great big Russian, just drafted in the, was it fifth round this last year,
Hmm.
and he's something like 6'4", 216 already.
Yeah.
Just turned 19 years old. So I got three of them. They're all right shots. They all like to play left wing. They all like to shoot the puck. Now, I haven't seen Borowskin more than a few highlights, and I want to get in to see a game of his at some point. But he's you know, he's in that same class, a year behind even Lavoie, because he's just been drafted, right? They took Maximov in 17, they took Lavoie in 19, they took Borowskin in 20. So you have to keep that in mind. But
He could
the
be on the
idea
world
of
junior team.
yeah, 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 but a big power, like in each case we're talking to guys that project to be 6'4", 220, true power forward size, that have a significant amount of skill and like to shoot the puck from the inside of the ice. Right shots on the left side is the preferred position for all three guys, as far as I can tell.
The next player we'll talk about is the world's smallest power forward, Joakim Nygaard. He does try to play quite a physical power game. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I like about Nygaard. He gets in there and he battles. Like, he's a very competitive hockey player, and he had quite a good game. His
Hmm.
last game that I saw, he got a primary assist. He went speeding down the wing and behind the net and centered the puck cross crease to his teammate, and the teammate put it in for a really easy goal. So that was good to see, because there's questions about Nygaard's hand. He broke his hand and he's had surgery on it, and is that hand in full functioning order?
Right.
I can tell you his skates and his feet and his legs are moving pretty fast, and he looks good. I like Nygaard. He's playing the PK.
That's very important, because if he wants to make the Oilers, he's got to bring that, because that's an area of need for the Oilers.
Maximov also plays the PK,
Hmm.
and as does Puljujarvi this year in
A
Finland,
little bit.
a little bit. Nygaard, I think, is a really good candidate for the PK. And you're right, his chances of making the Oilers get to, like, from one out of two if he's a good PK guy, or even better, 2 out of 3, to like 1 in 10 if he can't do the PK, because they need someone on the bottom lines to do the PK now, and
Right.
if he's going to take Archibald's spot, right? And they
Yeah.
could be in direct competition, or chase on spot. Like, he has got to do that PK thing, and he does it. Like, I think he's pretty good at it, and he works hard, blocks shots. He's not afraid to block a shot. So good game from Joakim Nygaard. The
He's
last
a
guy.
he's a
Go ahead.
dogged guy, eh?
Yeah.
Nygaard. He really, like, he doesn't quit on plays, and he's in your face. Like, I like that about him. It took him a while before we really started seeing that game to game on the Oilers. And last January he was terrific, and then he broke his hand, and that was that. The season was over, and it was unfortunate, because he was really starting to come on just at that time.
He would have been in the Oilers lineup in the playoffs. I don't
Oh
have
yeah.
any doubt about it. He was just really playing well. I don't know what the coaches think of him. Like, you don't really hear much, but they did give him another contract, right?
Yep.
Did that happen after he broke his hand, that he got the other?
Yep.
It did.
Sure did.
So
Yep.
even after that, like, they thought, let's give this. We like him enough to give. That says something there.
Yep.
So the last player, Bruce, is Philip Broberg,
Hmm.
and the Oilers' first round draft pick in 2019. If you don't recognize the name, the way we're pronouncing it, as they say it in Sweden. So Broberg, it's funny, because I watched this game twice, and the first time I ranked him, I gave him a 5, and the second time a 6, and I realized I wasn't really being fair to the player in my first view of it, because I think I'm starting to expect too much from him. I'm starting to expect to see him use that unbelievable skating ability, like Paul Coffey might have used that skating ability, just to shred the other team. And instead, I see a player who's a little bit timid in that regard, like, who rushes the puck up the ice, and then he gets to the blue line, and he could then decide to make a rush in, and instead he dumps it in. So he doesn't take on the D-man. He doesn't try to cut into the middle of the ice or burn around him to the outside. He makes the safe play, dumps it in. So I think I'm holding that a little bit against him. Like, my expectation is more than what I'm seeing, but what I do see actually was still pretty good in that game. He made lots of solid defensive plays. He made lots of solid offensive plays. He was out for one goal against. It was a 2-on-3 that kind of came down his side, but it wasn't his fault. He was on his man, who kind of blocked his body, took him out, and passed it back to the trailer. And the trailer came in, a shot from the high slot. The goalie should have had it. It might have gone off Broberg, but I don't really blame him on that one. It was kind of a tough play. And then they had him out. The really good news was they had him out in overtime again.
Mm-hmm.
Second time they've seen him in 3-on-3, and he's great. I mean, he made a really solid move in his own end to gain time and space to make a great breakout pass that led to a 2-on-1 play. He came down to the other end himself as the last man and got the puck in the high slot, and was a little slow on shooting. It deflected wide. Play keeps going on, and then he was the defender on a 2-on-1. He was completely calm on that 2-on-1, played it perfectly to the extent that he pretty much got stick on puck, and there was only a weak shot on net because of his really good defensive play there. So it was two strong plays at either end of the ice, 3-on-3. I think he really is. He really is in the right place for him right now, and I would put there's the people are saying he's a 4, 5, 6 D-man in the NHL, and there's people who saw him in training camp who say, well, he's moved to the top of the Oilers depth chart in terms of prospects. He's moved ahead of Evan Bouchard and might make the team this year. I would say between those two things is the reality of Philip Broberg. My guess is he's really in the right place right now. He should probably stay in Sweden for this year in Sweden, and then come over to North America. And in terms of comparing him to Bouchard, again, it's a little hard to do because we're seeing Bouchard in the Allsvenskan, which is a cut below in terms of quality of play.
Yeah.
But Evan Bouchard he's starting to get underrated almost. I'm gonna suggest he's an amazing. Evan Bouchard is a pretty amazing offensive hockey player right now, like NHL quality power play quarterback right now. That's what I'm saying about Evan Bouchard. There's questions about his defensive play, but could he run an NHL power play? No 100%. Doubt about it. So,
yeah, he's the flavor of last month, hey, Evan Bouchard. Like he's still around. He's still good. And there was so much talk about Broberg when he came over to the COVID camp there before the play-in series, and he really impressed for a while in scrimmages and stuff. But the question that all these guys boil down to, and we've talked about this already on this podcast, is consistency, right? You see a guy at his best, and you think, holy moly, that guy's going to be. You see another game, you think that guy's never going to make it, and then it's the same guy, and over time they develop, 60% of the best and 20% of the worst and 20% somewhere in between. Whatever the mix is going to determine how much of an impact player that guy's going to be. There's very few players that are at their best on a nightly basis. Like that's, so when you're talking about limited viewings, like we were getting this camp, obviously he came into camp burning hot into Oilers camp, but obviously he came into camp looking to impress in camp, whereas most of the guys in that camp were trying to sort of play their way into being ready to play games in August. So it's often in NHL camps, the rookies look good for a while, and then as the games ramp up in intensity, their star starts to shine a little bit less brightly. And it's not even a knock; it's just part of the process.
Major points for being ready for camp for the kid. Like that's 100%. Part of making it. That's part of it. Impressing. Major points for coming in there and impressing everybody, right? Impressing all the Oilers hockey insiders. Good for him. Like that's a really good signal and a really good sign. I'm glad that happened. It just shows the first impressions can be misleading with hockey players. First impressions can give you an idea of the skill, but like you say, can they consistently apply that skill? But worst of all is the kind of the Twitter, and we've all been this guy, the Twitter scout. Like you see the Twitter highlight film of the player and you think, oh, that's the player. And you're not the context of it. Okay, what quality of league is that? Mm-hmm. And Kurt Levin's got eaten alive this summer by critics when he suggested there was a 3-on-3 game against like weak competition that Puljujarvi was in. And Kurt had the temerity to suggest that this wasn't the highest level of competition. He may have overstated it. I can't say, I'm not sure. But Kurt's point, I think, was a good one. Like, think a little bit, really consider this, and this is another thing that I'm learning from this, Bruce. It's been a good exercise in this, is you really do have to, when watching, especially, like when Evan Bouchard gets the puck, circumnavigates the hockey globe and rushes then down the middle of the ice and rams home the goal. Like, okay, this is though in Allsvenskan. Like, this isn't that much different than Major Junior. It's just one cut above that. So let's put that into context. So we're gonna have to weigh all these things. We're gonna, as I've been saying, we're gonna come up with we're gonna re-rank the Oilers prospects because of the draft. We haven't seen the players. We didn't rank the players in the draft because we had our vote before. So it's going to be fun, though, to re-rank them just before. We'll probably do that in early December, I guess. Before the Oilers camp, whenever that is.
Sometime before camp, yeah. I mean, we've already written about most of the players, but there'll be a few newcomers that we'll write specific posts about. But the rankings, I think we're going to start fresh, right?
Yeah.
So.
And hopefully we'll see Carter Savoy play some games in U.S. college hockey. I don't know if he's playing yet or not. I'm not sure about that. And we'll hopefully drop in on Michael Kesselring, and maybe if Phil Kemp plays as well. I'm not sure if their season might be canceled.
Kemp's season is canceled. He's in the Ivy League, and they just canceled their sports programs altogether for 2021. So It's not just the winter semester, it's the school year. And this would have been his senior year. He was slated to be the captain of Yale. And I'm sure a year he was really looking forward to is come off the rails. But what that might do is open up the window for him to be signed. And whether he signs with the Oilers or decides to do that American-born U.S. college thing the way John Marino did, we don't know. But he's a player of interest that don't be too shocked if some word comes out that the Oilers are talking about signing this guy.
They should be looking at signing him right now if he's not going to play hockey this year. If he wants to be a pro player, he's got to play this winter, almost certainly, right? And so it'll be good for the Oilers to know one way or the other where Kemp stands. Does he want to sign here or not? And if not, then maybe they can trade him for more than a 7th-round draft pick like they got from Marino. So, we'll keep an eye on that. Well, Bruce, maybe we should leave it there.
Okay, kind of gone around the waterfront, David.
Indeed.
At least we got games to watch these days, so that's a step in the right direction, even if they aren't NHL games. They're NHL players, or NHL future players, and so at least stuff to keep us watching and writing and talking.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it actually. It's you learn more about hockey all the time, and seeing these leagues where I usually never see full games or partial games is very interesting.
My Swedish is much better.
I really noticed improved. That. Yeah. Bruce Berry.
Oh.
All right. Thanks, Bruce. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast. Oops, hit the wrong button here. I still got to turn this off.
Well,